What does breaking a bone feel like? At first it doesn't hurt. After 2 hours, it was the worst pain in my life. I fractured my elbow during a fall while playing volleyball. I couldn't sleep more than 2 hours at night due to the constant pain. I ended up in the hospital at 8 AM with tons of painkiller and shit. It hurt like a bastard and I could swear I heard a pop when it happened. I was wearing ice skates, waddling out to the rink when one skate got caught in ice and the other didn't. One leg spun out, the other didn't, and I twisted an extra angle into one shin. It hurt like hell, like a really intense soreness in that leg, especially when they pulled the skate off. Fentanyl was nice, though. Don't plan to make a habit of it. Broke both bones in both arms. Dislocated my left wrist and broke my growth plate in my right arm right above my wrist all at the same time. I was younger, but I don't remember being in all that much pain. It was more scary than it was painful, although the feeling of your bone pressing against your tendons isn't such a great one. For me, it didn't hurt at all. I had my wrist snap in half causing my arm to break and I didn't feel any pain besides when I tried to push myself up with that arm. I broke it when I slid into home plate during a baseball game. Anyways, after the few little pinpricks in the ambulance, there was no other pain. Plus side is that you get a bunch of chicks asking what happened and if you're okay. Depending on the break, it can feel radically different. Additionally, everyone's pain thresholds are different. The one thing they have in common is it isn't pleasant or enjoyable, unless maybe you're a masochist. It doesn't honestly hurt at all. There's no snap, type of pain or whatever. Then adrenaline and shock roll around and it's not that bad at all. When it sucks is about 4 hours later, and the worst is the first morning after the break. It's like they took all the achiness from the flu and put it wherever the break is, and then whacked it with a hammer. I have been told breaking a rib is super painful, but the first time I did that, I didn't even know. Then I broke it again, and I knew that time. It felt like I dislocated it and it hurt to breath but wasn't much different than a really bad bruise. Otherwise I've broken my upper arm, forearm just above the wrist, ankles multiple times, and like I said, same rib twice. Rib was honestly the freakiest even if the pain wasn't as bad as say my upper arm or my ankle. I broke my femur bone one fine family day and honestly it didn't hurt at all, not then and not really after. What did hurt was the stiffness in my knee, but that was about it. Oh, and it's pretty interesting to move one half of your bone and hit the other half. Not at all what you'd think. At least in my experience. There's no snap really, it just feels uncomfortable and about the pain of rolling your ankle. It really depends on the break though. It's not bad if you don't have pressure applied. Source: broke my metatarsal bone under my pinky toe. For me, nothing. I've broken multiple bones and not once has a doctor believed me initially. But of course as soon as the X-ray is taken the doctors are like, oh shit, it is broken. The reason I was able to tell the bone was broken each time was because my muscles were stiff and the limb looked odd. For me it's been dependent on the bone. My finger hurt right away. It was obviously broken. Setting it sucked. A couple days later though it was basically just a dull ache unless I hit it on something. Collarbone was more of a something might be really wrong, but not so much if I'm not moving. Didn't have to have that one set, but it was rough healing. There was a long time of moving wrong and having shooting pains in my neck. Wrist and leg happened at the same time. I didn't really notice either. Shock from a motorcycle accident. Leg was inconvenient as hell, especially because I couldn't use crutches. It healed without any incident. Wrist on the other hand was terrible. Ended up with rods in my arm. Never did heal right. Had a couple more surgeries on it after the initial. Still isn't right, it hurts pretty much constantly. It really depends on the bone and type of break. I've broken my ankle on duty, slipped on some ice and rolled it. It was a minor fracture that didn't require surgery or even a real cast. I was in a walking boot and on crutches for a month. I should have stayed in the boot longer and taken at least 2 more weeks before I returned to full duty, but I was young and dumb and talked my doctor into clearing me sooner. It didn't hurt all that much and I thought I'd just sprained it. I walked around in it at work for about 2 hours before I was able to get to the hospital to have it x-rayed. I initially thought it was just sprained. The said it was a sprain, and it wasn't until I went to the orthopedic surgeon that I found out I'd actually broken it. 10+ years later and it still aches sometimes, especially when it's cold. One of my SGTs broke his leg over a year ago. He required surgery and spent several months with one of those external metal cages screwed into his leg to hold it together. He said it was one of the most painful things he's ever experienced. I've broken my nose 3 times. The first throbbed and had to be reset with a toffee hammer, but the second 2 times I pushed it back in place myself and it healed quite quickly. Broken big toe felt like it needed cracked but was super sensitive to anything touching it when it was knitting together. 2 fingers were taped together and it was a constant cramp sensation. Broken metatarsal in my foot was unreal, couldn't sleep. Put weight on it. Throbbed constantly and I think I passed out with the pain from it a few times. Took weeks to heal as I kept trying to walk on it and felt like my foot was disjointed from my ankle, or the best visual description was, I could feel the muscle peeling away from the bone like cutting a tomahawk steak. Lovely. I grew up skateboarding and was sponsored for a while and I've fucking drifted off on the couch trying to count my broken bones. Anyway, the worst wasn't even from skating. Dislocated my knee surfing and spent 9 months in recovery after radical reconstructive knee surgery. They used part of my hamstring to reform the tendon in my kneecap. ACL, anterior cruciate ligament. It's funny because with no regular movement your leg starts to get atrophied and just becomes a skinny stick. Then you have to go to physiotherapy and rebuild all the muscles. You go into shock. You can't feel anything, but you know something is very wrong, and you're just paralyzed. And then you see your elbow is right next to your shoulder, and you scream your lungs out for mum. I shattered and dislocated my elbow falling elbow first onto concrete when I was 11 years old. Because I had to have surgery to piece together my elbow and insert steel rods to restore nerves, I didn't really feel the pain of a broken bone until I was out of hospital a few days later. 0/10 do not recommend. I felt like a little hit, but when I tried to move the affected bone I was immediately sweating. Is like a luxation. I also experienced that, which is constant pain until you put the bone to the place. Then the pain goes away, but worse. Your bone tries to fit well and your bone collides with the other part of your bone, causing constant pain but with a fucking short but worse pain at some times when the bones fit. I also had muscles inside the fracture, so I think it was even worse. I fractured my wrist once. As the bone broke, it felt like an electric shock. After a few minutes the pain eased, and it stayed pretty shallow as long as I didn't move my wrist. But when I did move, the pain was brief but excruciating, and I can only describe it as 1.21 gigawatts of electricity going through my arm. First there's the adrenaline tingle and the feeling that something is very wrong with this limb. Then you try to put weight on it, and get such a sharp pain that you nearly faint XX. After about 30 minutes, the adrenaline wears off and is replaced by the 7th of August 2010 dull pain, accentuated by sharp pain if you move the damn thing. It's a painful throbbing for hours if not days, and if you completely shear a bone in half it gets very confusing, because your body knows parts aren't where they should be, and it genuinely confuses the fuck out of you, all while being very painful.